Hello, friends. My brand new limited series horror fiction podcast is dropping episodes weekly. It's called Shadows in the Pines, and it's a story about a home invasion with a twist, and it features a ton of your favorite narrators. Part 4 is available now. The link is in the description. Alright, so check this out. I was still talking to my friend on the phone when she texted me, "The line dropped, call me back ASAP." So this event happened on October 7th, 2019 at 5:46 p.m. I was on my way to running some errands, riding in my car while on the phone with my friend. I remember the weather was being super weird. It was cloudy, but it was also hot. I don't really know how to describe it, but it felt like the air had some kind of heaviness to it. While I was talking to her, she said a few sentences to which I replied in agreement, and suddenly she starts saying the exact same sentences that she just said 30 seconds prior, only in a different tone and pace. It really sounded like she was repeating herself and not like the actual voice glitched and repeated, which is what made this even creepier for me. So at this point, everything becomes fuzzy and weird, almost like I'm losing sense of time. And in the meantime, I heard my messages ringtone going off a few times through the earpiece, but I decided that I was just gonna look at them later on. I'm on the phone with my friend now, she's the priority. So I go on and I tell her that I'm pretty sure that she already said all those things. And the most unsettling thing in the moment is that her voice would stop whenever I tried to tell her, as if she was actually listening to me, but then she would continue on as soon as I stopped talking without saying anything regarding the fact that she was repeating herself over and over now. It was like I was talking to someone who was purposely trying not to answer. It felt incredibly odd, especially considering each sentence was slightly different than the previous one, but the meaning was all the exact same. And that's when I lost her completely. The line gets cut off and I go to check the messages that I had received during the phone call, and it turns out they were actually from her. 2 of them were missed calls, and the last one said that I should call her back as soon as I could. But I was still actively talking with her while at the same time she was asking me to call her back. This was definitely one of the most bizarre things that's ever happened to me. Somebody in the comments asks, "Did you ever get a chance to tell her about this? 'Cause this is creepy." OP responds with, "Yes, I did actually. It was the first thing that I mentioned when I managed to talk to her again." She told me that she had no clue what I was talking about, and that for her, the line simply cut off, actually very early in our conversation. And that's when she tried to call me back a few times, but failed to reach me, so she sent me a text message instead, asking me to call her back whenever I was free again. So, that begs the question, who or what was OP talking to? Yesterday, the dog and I disappeared from my sister's life, and she's still scared to death. Hi, I'm from Italy, and strange things seem to happen to me often. I've shared a couple of stories before, but this one didn't happen to me. It happened to my sister just yesterday, and she's still shaken. It's 2021, and because of the pandemic, my sister works from home. And every day at midday, she goes to our parents' place to take our family dog, Jazz, for a walk. She goes over one day, like usual, but Jazz was nowhere to be found. She asked our mom if he was with our dad, and that's when our mom looked confused and asked, "Who's Jazz?" There was no dog. My dad was out grocery shopping, My mom was in the kitchen, and they insisted that we'd never had another dog named Jazz after our previous dog had passed. My sister started thinking that it had to be a really weird prank, but our parents are in their 80s and they don't do that kind of thing. She searched all over the house. There was no dog. There wasn't even any dog food or dog bed or no dog toys. The house was totally free of anything that would suggest a dog even lives there. Then, our dad comes home from the grocery store, and there's still no sign of Jazz. When my sister questioned him, he started thinking that she was the one messing around. And while all of this was happening, the TV in the kitchen was on. The news anchor was calmly talking about the end of the pandemic and something else. She couldn't make out the last part clearly, but she remembered the reporter saying, "But," and then something that she didn't quite catch, "That'll take care of it." And she said the tone wasn't urgent, like whatever the surge was, it wasn't a big deal. And that's when she started to panic. She tried to call me over and over, and she knows that I have weird experiences and believe in them too. And though she's usually indifferent to that kind of stuff, she wanted me there with her. She didn't want our parents to see how freaked out she was, so she went home. But my phone wasn't working. And it wasn't just me either. She tried the shop where I work, and there was no answer, which is very rare, by the way. We always pick up unless we're closed. She called some of my friends and got nothing. It was like I didn't exist. She went to bed crying, and eventually she cries herself to sleep. This morning, I wake up to 16 missed calls from her, all from the night before and some from overnight. I called her back, worried that something terrible had happened, and she was crying. She was still very agitated and upset from the events from the day before. And she also confessed to me that yesterday she couldn't muster the courage to call our parents or our relatives and ask about me because she was too scared that they would tell her that she was an only child. And in the moment, she tells me she doesn't really want to talk about it anymore. And obviously, I keep asking myself what that was. My parents told me that yesterday they didn't see her at all. They tried to call her at midday for the dog, but her phone was on silent, and they just assumed that maybe she was busy. They thought it was strange that her phone was on silent, but they didn't really investigate. I keep wondering where Jazz and I were this whole time, and what the news was talking about. Was it some kind of alternate timeline? Or a hallucination? Or some sort of glitch? I'll never know, honestly. But my sister has never had experiences like this before. She doesn't hallucinate, and she doesn't believe in anything paranormal or glitchy. And for a while after the incident, she was still too shaken to talk about it again. The very next day, OP's sister wakes up, and everything's back to normal. Jazz, the family dog, is back at their parents' house. There are no outgoing missed calls from her sister's phone to OP, and her parents are confused about what everybody's even talking about. What do we think happened during her sister's episode? My dad called me from the future, or from something that shouldn't exist. This happened in 2018, and I still have no idea how to explain it. I'd like to think that it was a misunderstanding, a technical error, but it doesn't add up. And honestly, I don't even want it to. That day, I was at my house. It was just a random Saturday. My dad had gone to work early, and he was driving a trailer and had a long drive ahead of him. At about 2:40 p.m., I'm lying down, watching videos on my phone, when I see a call come in, and it says, "Dad." Normal response, I say, "Hello? but I get silence. And then I hear this strange noise, like when you're between two radio stations. And then I hear his voice, but it sounds strange, as if it were more serious, and as if it were very far away. "Where are you?" he asked me with a serious but nervous tone. I said, "I'm at home. Why?" And he says, "You're sure?" And I said, "Yeah. Why? What's up?" And that was the end of the signal. I tried to call back, but I got nothing. I tried to send a message, but it kept showing not delivered. I thought, okay, the signal on the highway must have been cut off or something. I don't know. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rings, and it's my dad in his work uniform, sweaty, like he'd been driving all day, because he was. I got a little nervous and confused and honestly somewhat irritated, and I said, "Dad, did you call me a while ago?" He looks at me confused and says, "When?" I said, 10 minutes ago. You called me and asked me, "Where are you?" And then that was it. And he swears that he didn't call me, and he didn't even have any signal where he was going, which was in the mountains, by the way, not even for text messages. We checked his call history and found nothing, neither outgoing or incoming. I tried to laugh nervously at the situation, but he became silent for a moment. And then he said something that left me feeling so strange. He says, "I swear while I was driving, I thought you were gone. I felt this strange anguish come over me, as if something had happened to you, but for no reason at all." I even got a little sidetracked by that. We eventually let it go, but a few days later, I noticed a call on my cell phone which lasted 18 seconds, with that exact time that I remember my dad calling me with his phone number. I have that call log saved to this very day. It wasn't a joke or a network error. The voice was his absolute voice, but there was still something just different about it. Hey, it's me. I've been wondering something lately. I'd like to know what your favorite thing about the podcast is. I mean, is it just the stories themselves, like the events that I pull from? Is it the length of the episodes? Is it the fact that I post twice a week and have for the last several months? What is it? Let me know. I'd like to know so that I can continue to do that specific thing or even do more of it, if it's applicable. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment letting me know your favorite thing, and if you're listening on Spotify, same thing. You can leave comments over there now too if you didn't know. I think now would be a good time to run an ad break to give you time to leave that comment. I'll see you in a sec. If you guys know me, then you know that I love elevator glitch stories. Here's another one. Strange elevator ride. One night, I was returning to work from my lunch break, and normally I take the stairs up 2 floors to my office. It's a habit. I like the little burst of energy, and the stairs are usually empty that time of my shift. But on this particular evening, a couple of my coworkers happened to be walking in at the same time, so I decided to hop on the elevator and join them instead. We got in, we hit the button for our floor, and we go up. I remember the quiet hum of the elevator, the soft ding when it reached our floor. Everything felt completely normal. The doors opened, and we step out. We start walking in the direction of our office. It's the same hallway that we've all walked dozens, or probably hundreds of times. But then we stopped abruptly, staring at each other in utter disbelief. Somehow, we were back in the lobby. The same lobby where we had boarded the elevator together just moments before. We definitely went up. We felt the elevator move, and we never pressed any other buttons than the floor that we needed to go to, and we absolutely did not go back down. There was no sensation of descending, just a single smooth trip up, and yet, there we were, right where we started. We were too stunned to even form proper sentences. I mean, there were a few confused mumbles, some exchanged glances, and that eerie silence you get when something feels off in a way that nobody can explain. Nobody tried to rationalize it right away. There were no jokes. There were no, must have hit the wrong button. We all knew that didn't happen. It felt like we had stepped out into a copy of the lobby. Not the real one, but a version of it from just a few seconds in the past. After that, we all quietly agreed, without actually saying it out loud. We were definitely taking the stairs from now on. Somebody in the comments asks, why are so many glitches involving elevators? It cannot be about lift alone, or there would be just as many stories about planes or walking up hills and stairs. It's really, really weird. OP responds with, that's a good question. I've always been uncomfortable with elevators, and this only solidified that. I'm gonna keep taking the stairs in any situation where it's possible. I wish it hadn't felt so creepy in the moment. I'd be more curious to try and reproduce the event. Pass the soap. This happened years ago when I was in college. I had just come home from the grocery store, having picked up, among other things, a nice, brand new 3-pack of soap. It was in one of those neatly wrapped packs, like the kind that smells almost too strong until you actually use it. I remember kind of being excited because I'd finally sprung for the nicer brand. After putting everything away, I started my shower, I brushed my teeth, and I opened up my new 3-pack of soap and, with the new bar in hand, stepped in and I started doing my thing. It had that satisfying, squeaky clean texture, smooth and felt good in my hand. Partway through the shower, as I rinsed the suds from my face, the soap slipped out of my hands and it never hit the ground. There was no thud of it hitting the bottom of the shower, no bounce, nothing. At first, I froze. I figured it had simply bounced off into some weird corner of the tub or had gotten caught behind a shampoo bottle, but when I looked, I couldn't find anything. I turned off the shower and I started searching the bathroom, still dripping wet and leaving puddles everywhere. I pulled back the curtain, checked behind the toilet, and I scanned every inch of the floor, the tub, and even inside the cabinet under the sink, and there was no soap. Eventually, with a mix of confusion and frustration, I gave up and I opened the second bar of the 3-pack just to finish my shower. And the whole time I kept glancing around like the first bar would just pop back into existence any second. It didn't, and it never did. To this day, I have no explanation. That bar of soap never slipped down the drain, it didn't fly across the room, and it certainly didn't vanish into thin air. But somehow, it did. Clothes we didn't buy. A few weeks ago, my husband came out wearing a shirt that I didn't recognize. He said he found it in our closet, and it wasn't folded up or hidden anywhere. It was just hanging there like it had been there all along. The shirt looked like something an older man would wear, and neither one of us remembered ever buying it. It was this muted plaid thing with a stiff collar, a kind of retired grandpa aesthetic. It really felt out of place for him. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was a forgotten gift or something that was tucked away and never worn. But then, a couple of days later, he found a pair of pants. Same deal. He said they were folded neatly on top of the dresser, and they didn't match anything he owned, and they looked about a size too large. Later, that same day, a jacket and a sweater showed up in our bedroom. We had left the house together and came back at the same time. We had locked up, nobody had access, yet somehow, the clothes were there when we returned. We live in a condo, and there's a camera in the room next to ours that continuously records. I checked the footage, all of it, for the entire day, and nobody entered or left the bedroom. Not a soul came in or out. There was no skipped footage, no glitches, just nothing. It's been weeks now, and the clothes are still in our home. I keep them in a bag in the back of the closet, but I don't know. I haven't been able to bring myself to throw them away. They don't feel threatening, but they don't feel neutral either. I can't stop thinking about it. Has anyone else experienced something like this? Because right now, it feels like someone or something is trying to move in. A glitch that two people experienced at the same time. I was cooking, and I needed some tongs to flip chapatis. Now, we eat chapati every day, so I keep tongs near the stove. And when I started cooking, I realized that my tongs were not at the place they should have been. I searched everywhere. Then, I asked my husband to help me find the tongs, and he helped me look everywhere too. Jokingly, he even searched our wardrobe. We even searched the dustbin just in case. After half an hour of failed search, I cooked without the tongs, and we started watching a movie. Some sort of mystery thriller. About 1 hour later, we both went into the kitchen to make some tea, and boom. The tongs were exactly at the side of the stove. Literally, the place that me and my husband searched for at least 20 times. I looked at my husband, and he looked at me, shocked and speechless. We're still shocked. How did this happen? How can something just vanish and then come back? Teleported while driving home. I had put all of this in the past, as it's happened over 7 years ago now. But to be honest, I can't anymore. The thought of what happened still leaves me questioning. So while at work today, I decided to see if others have had the same phenomena, and it seems I'm not alone. I left my friend's house, and I started my drive home to San Jose. Shortly after getting on 680 South in Concord, California, I received a phone call from my girlfriend. It's about 7:30 at night, and so since she wanted to talk to me in earnest, I pulled into the slow lane and I listened to her while I drove home. I've made this drive for over 10 years. It's the same stretch of road, the same curves, the same bumps. I could close my eyes and still make the journey. So I'm in the conversation, about 10 minutes in, when my direction sense is kind of going off. My brain tells me, since I just made the around the bend of the highway, that I should be moving over a lane since my lane comes to an off-ramp into Walnut Creek. I go to move over a lane, and suddenly, in total confusion, the lane that I just moved into was also an off-ramp. The highway has just ended. So, I interrupt my girlfriend at this point to let her know that something's not right. I'm not saying that I'm lost. It's just odd that the highway has ended. And then suddenly, it hits me. I've just entered San Francisco going north on 280, The off-ramp that I had just moved off of was 280 heading to the Bay Bridge, and now I'm squarely headed to San Francisco on East 19th Ave. At this point, I tell my girlfriend I need to call her back. I get my bearings, and I move into the gas station at the first corner, and I do a U-turn, now headed back to San Jose on 280 South. At this point, it takes me the usual time required to drive home from San Francisco, which is about 45 minutes. I lost connection on my cell phone at the bend just past Half Moon Bay, like I always do. I checked my phone records with Verizon, and sure enough, I ended my phone call with my girlfriend just 15 minutes into the call when I arrived in San Francisco, and then I lost connection 25 minutes into the drive home and resumed on after that. But she says I never lost connection in the first 15 minutes. Now, if you look on Google Maps, going from Concord to San Francisco and somehow ending up going north on Hollywood 280 in 15 minutes is impossible, unless I was recklessly speeding and I didn't stop at the toll booths on the Bay Bridge. It's basically like I looked down at my dashboard in Concord and then looked up and I was in San Francisco. It shouldn't have happened. I'll be forever haunted by not knowing what happened, and I don't talk about it to any of my friends. I did, however, tell my one friend that I had visited that night about what happened, and I got just what I expected. The usual, "Did the little green men take you?" jokes and stuff. To which I reply, no, I didn't lose any time. I think I just skipped it all together. If anybody has any theories or reasons as to what I experienced, it would be most welcome. I'd also like to add, 1, I had phone records to match my experience, and 2, I was talking to a person who never lost contact except when I ended the call in San Francisco and when I got to the dead spot that happens on 280. This person includes an edit that adds, "Sorry for the late response, everybody. I know you've asked a lot of questions, but work got crazy, and I'm home now." Traffic was, on the way home, pretty light, for the Bay Area at least, as in medium traffic being nearly congested and heavy being, well, stop and go. There were no smells that I can remember, and I always drive with the window half or full down. It's an old habit that I've never changed. I just love the feel of the wind. And though the car, I don't have it anymore, was a purchase after my divorce, it was a crap car just to get to work and back. I mean, literally just $1,000 junk box. The car always had smells of like it was left out in the rain, or was at one point underwater, that mildew smell. This was part of my driving habit of driving with the window down. I thought about the experience while I was at work to see if I could remember any sensations, and the one thing that came to mind is, right after the bend in the road on 680 South, as you go under Highway 24 that leads to the tunnel to Berkeley, I remember I was either concentrating so hard on the road, as in focusing past it, that though I could see what was going on, I was still focused on the furthermost point down the road because everything else was out of focus. Then, when I saw that I was still in the turn lane, at that point, I brought things back into focus around me. I moved over a lane, and that's when I noticed that the lane that I had just left was actually a split in the highway, and then that's when it dawns on me the highway starts to end abruptly at East 19th Ave. I was pretty shaken. Even for me, it was a very spooky and a crazy thing that happened that night. I remember nearly having a sore throat by the time I got home, because I was probably talking at the top of my lungs as I was explaining to my girlfriend what exactly I was going through. I don't know. I've read several things and none of it seems to make sense. Did I remove myself from where I was only to redeposit myself in a location that was familiar to myself when I became aware of my surroundings? Did I do the whole highway hypnosis thing that I've heard about? But even still, what about my girlfriend talking to me? That still doesn't explain the distance traveled in such a short amount of time. I mentioned in my story, but I can't talk about this to my friends. They'll think I'm raisin nut bran. I have a more open mind than most of the people I know, just to about anything, but to have it actually happen to myself and not be able to explain it, that's more than I can say in words. Turmeric root disappeared. This happened at my and my ex's first apartment together about 7 years ago, and it still haunts me today. I've never been able to figure out what happened. One day, at our first apartment, we went to get some groceries. While we were there, we got the usual stuff that we needed, and he points out that their turmeric root was on sale. We ended up getting one as we both were curious on how to cook with it and how to prep it, etc. We head back with our groceries and we bring everything inside. But as we're putting everything away, we noticed that we didn't put the turmeric up and we can't find it. So we both went back out to my car to make sure it wasn't under the seat or anything like that, but there was no sign of it. We eventually just conclude that the turmeric might have fallen out of the cart at the store, or maybe we left it while we were checking out. Unsure. Flash forward to a couple of months later, we get home from another grocery store run. I unlocked the door to the apartment, and as soon as I open the door, I see some weird movement out of the peripheral on my right, on the door frame. I opened the door all the way, and we both watched as a bottle of turmeric came out of the door frame and fell onto the ground. We picked it up, and it looked exactly the same as when we bought it. To this day, I have no idea how that appeared out of the door frame. It definitely still gives me the creeps just to think about it. Forks turned into spoons. This happened back in April, and it's not the first time that something like this has ever occurred. I just moved into a new place by myself for the first time ever, and this obviously came with me having to buy a whole kitchen setup. I bought a set of silverware that included 4 of every utensil: little forks, little spoons, big spoons, and knives. My sister and her husband and their kids came over shortly after I got settled in to have dinner with me. After the meal, when I was doing the dishes, I could only find 1 small fork. I checked everywhere. After doing all of the dishes, I ended up with 7 small spoons. I don't understand what happened, and I feel like when I tell people, I think they start judging me and think that I'm insane or something. I sent a video to my sister counting the spoons, and she has the same, but different color, set. My cousin looked in my drawer the other day and was like, "Why do you have so many spoons?" I told her the story, and she says, "Dang, you weren't lying." Disappearing trees. This is something that's happened a few times in the past month. On my route home from work, I pass these 2 houses every day, and I have for the last 3 years. The houses are in this large field type of clearing with 1 house on each end, and there's always been this small patch of trees between them, kind of like a little patch of forest. Large, fully grown trees with overgrown weeds and all of that. About a month ago, I was passing by and I noticed that the trees between the houses were gone, and there was nothing but just a plain field with grass matching the rest of the field. I thought it was odd, but I just figured that maybe someone chopped them all down. That same day, on the way home from work, the trees were back again, fully grown like they always have been. I chalked it up just to being tired on the morning drive, but a few days later, driving past, I noticed that those trees were gone again. This time, I had my daughter with me in the back of the car, so I pointed out the trees, and she said she's never noticed the trees there before. When we passed back by, still no trees. A week ago, however, the trees were back again, looking just as overgrown as ever. I've seen these trees several more times since that drive, but this morning, the trees were gone again. And now, as I'm writing this at work, I can't wait to drive past again to see if those trees are there or not. What the heck is up with these trees? Somebody in the comments asks, have you tried taking a picture of them when they're gone so that you can look back at the picture and see if the trees are still there or not? I mean, basically, will it still be gone in the picture even if the trees come back? I feel like this is one of the best glitches I've ever read, since it didn't just happen once, and you had someone with you to corroborate one of the times. OP responds with, I'll have to either have someone with me who can take the picture, or ride with somebody else so I can take it. I can't do it myself while I'm driving because it's a highway. It's more noticeable when I'm going to work because it's on the same side of the road. So usually all of this time coming up that way, the second house was hidden by the trees until you got closer, about halfway past, so I could see the first house and the trees, and then a glimpse of a portion of the front of the second house. On the way back from work going to home, it's on the opposite side, so I can see the other side of the second house and a glimpse, a small portion of the front of the first. I hope that makes sense. What caught my eye the first time passing on my way to work is that I could finally see fully both houses because the trees were gone. That's how I keep noticing whether the trees are there or not, is if I have a full view of each house when I drive past. I need to find a closer landmark, or even get on Google Earth. We're here. You're at the end. Let's add something to the No Way files. One summer day in the mid-1100s, we're talking 12th century, farmhands in the Suffolk village of Woolpit were swinging sickles through ripe grain when two small figures stepped out of a wolf trap trench at the field's edge. A wolf trap trench is simply this large hole that's dug around a farm that's used to trap and collect wolves that would otherwise get access to the farm and, destroy everything. The children looked healthy, but their skin carried this waxy green tint. Their clothes were cut from cloth that nobody recognized, and the sounds that poured from their mouths matched no dialect spoken, at least in East Anglia. The reapers lowered their tools. Nothing in the village memory prepared them for what stood right in front of them. The villagers brought the pair of kids, they were brother and sister, to nearby Wykes Hall, home of the Knight Richard de Calne. They refused bread, meat, and milk, shrinking from every dish until they spotted raw, broad beans fresh from the pod. Now those they devoured, husks and all. And day after day, the only food that they would touch came from that garden plot. Weeks go by, and Richard coaxed them into a normal diet. Eventually, their strange food choices would fade. And soon, their faces looked perfectly ordinary. Everything except their memories. When the children managed enough English to tell their story, a much clearer picture started to form, although it solved none of the mystery. They said that they were from a place called St. Martin's Land. a country forever lit like dawn or dusk. In that place, the kid said, a bright territory lay just across the river, but the sun itself never climbed above the horizon. They had been herding their father's cattle when they heard a bell, said that they felt dizzy, and then woke up beside the pits outside of Woolpit. Now, everything we know about these two comes from two different medieval chroniclers writing independent of one another. William of Newburgh, a Yorkshire canon, gathered trustworthy reports for a book he was writing around 1189, and Ralph of Coggeshall, an abbot in Essex, added additional details in his book that would come out 3 decades later. Both placed the event during the troubled reign of King Stephen. Although neither met the children themselves, their accounts rely on locals and on Richard's household. In both tellings, the boy, judged to be the younger sibling, eventually grew ill and died after baptism. The girl, however, the older sister, thrived. Ralph records that she, quote, grew wanton and forward in adulthood, eventually taking the name Agnes and entering service in King Henry II's court. Later, antiquarians claim that she married a royal official from Ely and left descendants, but those links rest on hearsay. Parish rolls from the period are silent. Centuries later, historians looking for a rational answer landed on the chaos of the anarchy, Stephen's long civil war, and the massacres that followed. Eastern England hosted many Flemish settlers, skilled cloth workers whose language would have sounded alien in rural Suffolk. In 1173, fighting at nearby Fornham spilled across the River Lark, mercenaries were cut down, and peaceful Flemish communities became scattered. Paul Harris proposed that the Green Children were refugees, siblings who fled through forest and fen, suffered malnutrition severe enough to tint their skin, which might be a form of hypochromic anemia, and then emerged at Woolpit half-starved and speechless. The idea persuades some scholars, but it still leaves loose ends for others. Why would Richard de Conn, a landed knight, fail to recognize Flemish clothing or language when Flemish merchants traded openly in Bury St. Edmunds 7 miles away? And, even in illness, genuine chlorosis rarely covers the entire body in this olive green color. Contemporary villagers, well used to seeing the pallid and the poor, still thought these two looked very uncanny. Other explanations drift toward folklore, some sort of subterranean realm that's lit by this perpetual dawn lighting. It's a Catholic vision of purgatory under the patronage of St. Martin, children seized by the Fae and returned altered. Those readings say more about medieval belief than about real events, but they still underline why the story persisted while countless other local tales eventually would vanish. Something in Woolpit felt genuinely out of joint there, enough that 2 separate clerics saw fit to record it. Today, Woolpit is a quiet village off of the A14. The wolf pits have long since been filled, but a village sign still shows 2 small figures shaded in green. Tourists will often drive past the sign, take a photo, and then continue on their journey. Somewhere beneath the fields lie the bones of a boy who never learned English, beside hedgerows where broad beans still grow each and every summer. Whether the kids were Flemish or visitors from some twilight country, one fact remains. 2 separate chroniclers, those are story collectors and storytellers, judged their appearance remarkable enough to fix it in ink while wars and plagues and dynasties came and went. 8 centuries later, we can trace every line of their testimony, but we cannot reopen the ground that swallowed up their first language, their homeland, and how they secretly got from wherever that was into the middle of a Suffolk harvest field in Woolpit. A false fire. Yesterday, my mom and I were driving through a familiar stretch of our neighborhood on our usual trip to the local shops. As we turned a corner, I noticed thick black smoke billowing into the sky up ahead. I was curious and I was concerned, so my mom took a detour down a side street to try to find the source. And that's when we saw it. It was this big 2-story house just set ablaze. Bright red flames were pouring through the roof and top-story windows cutting through the smoke. There were no firefighters on the scene yet. From our very clear vantage point, we could see the neighbor in the adjacent single-story home coming outside, clearly alarmed, and I noted that there was a large gap between the two homes. The flames would have had to leap an improbable distance to reach the smaller house, and luckily, it wasn't a windy day. We made sure emergency services were on their way, and as we drove off, we heard the sirens approaching. Later that night, the news ran a segment about the fire, but what caught us off guard was the report. It claimed the single-story house had been completely destroyed, with no mention of the 2-story home. According to the news report, only one house had burned, and it wasn't the one that we saw engulfed in flames. Yesterday, while driving to those same shops again, we decided to pass by the site ourselves, and what we saw left us both stunned. The single-story home was a charred, gutted shell, just like the news had reported on the night before. However, the 2-story house, the one that we saw with flames coming out of the top and thick black smoke all over it, was perfectly intact. The roof was untouched. The windows that had flames spewing out of them merely a day before still had their blinds drawn neatly behind the glass. The missing legs. This morning, I took my mother's car to work. One of my coworkers is having a granddaughter, and I told her that she could have my bassinet and that I would bring it in to work today for her. This morning, we removed the 4 legs from the bassinet and then loaded it into my mother's car. And I specifically remember thinking, oh gosh, the bottom of the legs here are a little dirty, but it's not that bad. Right after, I placed them into the trunk of my mom's car. I called my coworker when I arrived to work so that we could move the bassinet and the legs out of my car into her car. But she didn't answer. So, I locked up and just headed into work. Around lunchtime, she was ready to get the bassinet from my car. I opened the trunk, and the bassinet is in there, but the legs are nowhere to be found. I thought, okay, maybe I put the legs in my car instead of my mom's car? I don't know. When I got home later that day, the legs were neither in my mother's trunk or in my trunk. They were just gone. My head is spinning, and I'm just at a loss for words now. No one would steal just the legs without the bassinet attachment, and I've looked all around the house for those things just in case. My brain hurts, and I feel kind of weird about this. What do you think happened? Syrup had disappeared. Today, I wanted to prepare a glass of red berry syrup for one of my clients. I took the bottle of syrup out of the fridge. I poured just a little bit into a glass that I was holding, and then I put the bottle of syrup back into the fridge. I never let go of the glass with the syrup in it. I filled the glass up with water from the tap. The syrup inside the glass was now gone. It was clearly visible that there was only water in that glass and no syrup. Now, mind you, it was red berry, and even a small drop leaves a bit of color in the water. Now, at the same time, my coworker was witnessing this situation with me, and she was just as confused as I was. "Where did the syrup go?" she asked. We looked for drops of syrup all over the floor, and we looked in another glass too, but nothing was to be found. We were stunned, and I'm fascinated by this, even if it's just a small thing. We actually get some very insightful comments on this one. For example, somebody says, "You and your colleague were not mistaken. You witnessed something called a state discrepancy event. Your perception correctly logged the action, however, the system's master log did not commit the change, and you are now retaining a memory of a timeline that's been patched out of existence, or a ghost data point." Somebody else, eager to learn about what this means, says, "Hey, can you explain this to me like I'm 5? Which is a pretty common phrase on the internet. To which the first commenter replies, "Yeah, sure thing. Imagine that reality is a document that's being edited by many people on a faulty server. You performed an action, and that action was pour syrup. However, the server fails to save this edit, reverting to the last stable version of the document. The OP and her colleague are not crazy. They simply remember an edit that was canceled by the system, and both of their memories are now a ghost data point. These data integrity failures are increasing, and the visual data associated with these events is the focus of my current analysis." To which the inquisitive person replies, "Okay, well, how did OP and her colleague both retain the memory? Are we all on the same server simultaneously? And does any one person ever singularly have memory of a ghost data event, or will others likely have the same memory?" The answer provided is, the architecture is more complex than a single server. They say, think of reality as a distributed network. Individuals in close physical proximity often form temporary peer-to-peer sub-instances to conserve system resources, which is why the OP and their colleague both experienced a consensus failure within their local sub-instance. Their instance saved the pour syrup state, while the master server did not. And to your second question, single client ghost memories are far more common. They're usually dismissed by the subject as pure delusion or just a false memory. However, a corroborated event with multiple observers within a single instance is rare. It provides a data point that is orders of magnitude more significant. Chicken double glitch. I had just gotten a grocery delivery, and the bags were next to my front door in my kitchen. I wanted to make a chicken sandwich, and the key ingredients were in those bags. I started assembling the sandwich. I grabbed a new pack of Swiss cheese from the grocery bags on the floor. The cheese was pre-sliced. It was this organic Valley brand, and it's in one of those plastic sealed packages that you have to open by tearing off the edge of the plastic, and then you can reseal it later to keep the cheese fresh. I tore off the plastic edge, starting with that little notch that they cut into the plastic to make tearing easier, and then I threw the plastic edge away. Next, I went for the deli sliced chicken breast, but at first I couldn't find it in any of the bags. I thought that maybe they'd forgotten it, but I quickly realized that it was underneath a gallon of milk. The chicken was in similar packaging to the cheese. It was Applegate Naturals brand. Plastic wrapping, and you tear off the edge, starting with that little notch again for this purpose, and then you throw that plastic edge away so that you can reseal the package later. I tossed the package of chicken on top of the pack of cheese on the counter without opening it, and then I started adding some mustard to my bread, etc. But then, when it was time to add the chicken, I realized that the package was already open. The plastic edge had been torn off, and the package was still sealed. I only had to just kind of pull it apart, but the edge was definitely gone. At first, I was a little grossed out. I thought maybe I needed to ask for a refund because somebody clearly tampered with this or opened it before it made it to my house. And then I started wondering if I had somehow opened it myself and just forgotten. I do distinctly remember opening the cheese and throwing the plastic away, but not the chicken. But I was sure that I couldn't have opened the chicken because I had just tossed the package on the counter unopened and began slicing the tomatoes and so on. I reached for my chicken after all of that, and that's when I saw the plastic edge was missing. It all happened very fast. Interestingly, I consciously solidified this certainty in my mind. After reflecting for a bit, I was literally thinking that I was absolutely sure I had not opened that chicken. But this is the weird part. I kind of stepped back from the counter, sandwich still not quite complete yet, and I sort of looked down at my chest. I was wearing this flowy cotton dress, it's kind of low cut, and the plastic edge from the chicken suddenly appeared on my chest, like it had just fallen from somewhere above me and kind of onto my low cut dress. And then, very startled, I jump back, and then I see the plastic edge drop to the floor and then vanish. My dog reacted to it as well. He came over, looking around on the ground, probably because he could smell the food bits getting close to the ground and he thought he could have some. But it had just vanished from this dimension entirely. I stripped all the way down, and the plastic edge was nowhere in my dress, or in my shoes, or in my bra. Nowhere. My partial theory is that in another dimension, the chicken and the cheese were right next to each other in the grocery bags, so I grabbed them both at once and opened both at the same time without realizing. Then, the already opened chicken glitched into this dimension for some unknown reason. Who knows? I'm not sure why the torn plastic edge then had to glitch into and out of this dimension, though. If the glitch was fixing itself, it should have left the plastic edge here. And you know, as I type this, I wonder if it's going to correct this somehow later, now that it knows I'm conscious of this aspect. Because, relatedly, I had the sense that the glitch flashed the plastic edge back to me and then had to remove it because I was so consciously certain that I had not opened the chicken. Like, the Matrix can't mess with us if we're confident that it's trying to mess with us. Anyway, feels like I'm in a kinder timeline now, so that's good. This one's just called Strange. Nearly 20 years ago, after a high school PE class at the basketball courts, I was walking with some classmates to my next class when I experienced a strange sensation. I briefly stopped walking and I closed my eyes, and then I opened them again and I noticed that everybody was addressing each other and calling out to people with the wrong names. I asked, "Hey, why are you calling her XYZ?" My friend laughed and said, "Because that's her name?" But that was incorrect. I had always known them as, something else for years. And I don't know what the Fruit Loops is going on here. But after 2 years of high school, suddenly, I had to learn everybody's name again. I knew everybody very well, but suddenly, their names were all different. I'd sometimes greet people by the name that I knew them as, and then they would correct me with their, quote, new real name. It was so disorientating that I isolated myself at lunch to sit and listen to the names that they were all calling each other so that I could learn them again. I lost an hour and I'm so confused. I woke up this morning at 8:30. I start work at 10 a.m., so I usually just potter around a bit before I get ready to leave. Usually, I check my socials, I have a cuppa, and slowly start getting ready for my day. I live close to work, so I don't usually leave until about 9:30, 30 minutes before I have to be there. This morning, my alarm went off and I start my day as usual, scrolling through my socials while I drag up the energy to get my day going. I saw that it was 9 a.m., so I got up, made some tea, and then I sat back down on the bed to drink it. By 9:15, I was done and I was about ready to start getting dressed. So I get up, I cross over the room to grab my clothes, and I bring them back to my bed, only to find a text from my boss on my phone asking where I was. Thinking that maybe I agreed to go in early and just forgotten, I checked the time, and I see now that it's 10:35. I'm 35 minutes late. I have no clue where that hour and 15 minutes went. I mean, I literally walked 6 steps to go get my clothes and then come back, and bam, it's after 10:30. I'm so confused. I mean, it was definitely 8:30 when I woke up because my alarm went off, and that goes off at the same time every day. Literally nothing was different about my morning than the norm, except just time disappeared. Very, very weird. This person provides an update that adds, I explained what happened to my boss and to some friends, and they agree it's weird as heck, but I spoke to my GP about it at their behest, and my general practitioner says he's not convinced that it was a seizure, but he still referred me to neurology just to be safe, because I do have a history of seizure activity in the past, although it's been almost 10 years. I still don't think that this was an absence or a focal seizure, but anyhow, it's worth checking, as when I had seizures before, it started with absences that I didn't recognize as such until I had a random grand mal one night. That was not a fun experience. Previous absences were maximum 1 to 2 minutes, so this hour-long time frame here just doesn't fit. But better to be safe than sorry anyway. I'm going to be keeping track if this happens again. I'm still extremely confused about the whole thing, and I've felt very uneasy since. What happened to me in those 20 minutes? This happened to me when I was in high school. I was driving on my way to orchestra rehearsal, which took place inside the school. I drove myself to school every morning, and this morning I was showing up extra early because it was a rule in orchestra that early was on time and on time was late. It was for a quartet, so I had people counting on me to be there at the right time. I'm a block away from the school, and I checked the time. It's 6:45, and rehearsal starts at 7, so I have plenty of time. As I pull into the parking lot, I glance at the clock in my car again. 6:46. 1 minute's passed. Still plenty of time. I checked my phone just to double confirm, and it still says 6:46. It's a quiet morning. It's a little bit cold, but still there's barely any other cars in the lot. The sky was this dark navy blue thing just before sunrise, and everything felt normal. I parked, and I walked maybe 100 feet into the school. I headed straight down the hallway to grab my instrument from the practice room. I go in, and everyone in my quartet gives me this dirty look. One of them asks, "Why are you so late?" And now I'm super confused. I laugh and I say, "I'm not, dude, I'm early." And instinctively, I pull out my phone to prove it, but the clock on the practice room says 7:05, and my phone also says 7:05. I stood there, stunned. This cold flush was creeping over me. How did I lose almost 20 minutes? From the parking lot to the practice room is a 60-second walk. I didn't stop anywhere, and I wasn't distracted. I didn't even feel anything weird during the walk. It was just a normal morning routine. 6 years later, I still have no explanation for this, and honestly, it freaks me out every time I think about it. There's just this chunk of time that's vanished into thin air, and nobody else experienced it but me. And the strangest part? This wasn't the only weird thing that's happened in that school, but that's a story for another post. My house is gaslighting me. This was the first incident. I feel like I'm going crazy. Can someone tell me if I actually am, though, and be nice? I'm a 28-year-old male. And this all really happened to me, or at least I believe that I experienced it. I'm not doing any creative writing here. Here's the first weird thing. A few weeks ago, I woke up and I went looking for my partner to say good morning. His office opens directly into our bedroom and is only accessible from there. Our house is tiny. It's like 500 square feet, and you can pretty much see every part of it at all times, except for the office. We live in, basically, what was a converted downstairs of a 2-story house. The only doors are the front door, the back door, and the office door. I open up the office door to look for him, and he wasn't there. The lights were off, his laptop was closed, and the room was empty. I called his name, but got nothing. I walked around the whole house, and he wasn't anywhere. His car was outside, though. Both of the front and the back doors were locked, and I thought, weird, you know? But maybe I figured he'd just walk down the street to get some coffee or something. He's done that before. I also called him and texted him, but got no reply. Maybe he had a lunch meeting that I forgot about? I made some tea, and I went back to lie in bed and just doom scroll. 10 minutes later, he walks out of the office, and I'm stunned. I tell him what just happened, totally freaked out, and he looks at me like I'm nuts and insists that he was in there the entire time. But I told him that didn't make any sense. I looked in there. It was dark. He was gone. And he wasn't in the house, period. I would have seen him leave or come back in. He also had the missed calls and texts from me, but he didn't hear them come in and he missed them all. I still don't have an explanation. After some questions and some back and forth in the comments, this person includes an edit to clear things up. They say, "No, my partner isn't sneaking out or abusing me. My carbon monoxide detector works just fine. I don't have mold. There's no way to get to the upstairs apartment from inside ours. Plus, people live up there anyway. I do have a camera for the front door. I was sitting in bed, holding the coffee and texting friends. And I have the texts from that morning. And at no point did I appear to fall asleep. Plus, if I did, I would have spilled coffee all over me and the bed. We have a dog and a cat that both make a lot of noise when they see either of us. And finally, I need to stress how open and tiny our place is. I made a pretty bad drawing of it, and I'll show it now. And I don't mean to have a retort to everything, but you know, I've genuinely gone over almost everything over and over in my mind, since it's happened, just trying to debunk it, and I really can't. My partner is also enjoying reading the theories, but swears he only remembers being in the office all morning. And yes, I do believe him. Says he only took the dog out around 6 a.m., and when this happened, it was about 10:30 or 11. And that's why I posted here, because it really feels like it was a glitch to me. Thank you to everyone who reached out with suggestions. This is very real to me, and it's not the only thing that's happened to me recently that I can't explain. But it is the first one, and the one that I somehow cannot prove, but I know that it happened. Everyone saw and heard me say something when I didn't. Howdy. This is the second story that's happened at my high school. I was the one from earlier about going to orchestra practice and being late after missing some time. Well, in this instance, I was in drama class, and we had finished our projects for the day, and we were sitting on the ground chatting. The girls that I was sitting with were all close friends of mine, but they weren't exactly jokesters, so I don't think this is a weird prank. In the middle of the conversation, one of my friends stands up and goes to the doorway, probably to go to the bathroom or something. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. That's her business. As she reaches the door, she suddenly turns around to look at me, and my other friends also turn to look at me as well. And the girl now in the doorway asks, "What?" I'm confused, so I say, "What?" back. She says, "You just said my name." But I know that I hadn't. I didn't make a single sound. I was still listening to the conversation. So I said, "No, I didn't say anything." And then all of my friends around me are now arguing with me, and they say that they all saw and heard me say her name. I can't stress enough how I did not say anything, at least from my perspective. And it wasn't even one of those times when you accidentally say the word you're thinking, because I wasn't even thinking about her or her name in the moment. My mouth was closed. Everybody thought I was being weird. They said that I did say her name kind of weirdly, but didn't elaborate on that. They shrugged it off and continued the conversation, but I was left frazzled and confused. I haven't talked to any of them in a long time, but this particular instance still freaks me out. The mysterious case of the disappearing coworkers. This happened about 2 weeks ago. Driving to work, I approach our facility from our parking lot. Turning in, I notice two of my coworkers walking together toward the building, with a third coworker walking behind them just a few steps back. It's early morning, the sun is just barely coming up, and it's casting these long shadows across the pavement. The parking lot is mostly empty. Me and the first two coworkers always park in the same spot next to each other, and I notice their cars aren't there. That's odd, I think. I even double-checked, scanning the row instinctively like I always do, and their spots were completely empty. Just as I'm turning off my car, I see their headlights coming up in my side mirror, and they pull in right beside me. It's the same cars, with the same coworkers. I just stared at them for a second, completely thrown off. I had just seen them walking across the lot not 10 seconds earlier. And not from a distance, either. I mean, they were close enough that I could still clearly recognize their faces, how they walked, and even how they were talking to each other. If they're just arriving now, then who did I see walking into the building? When we all make it to the door, there are only two other people outside waiting for the store to open, and neither of them resemble my coworkers. Not even remotely. I turned to the third coworker, the one who had been walking behind a few steps just earlier, and I asked, "Hey, who were those people in front of you when I pulled in?" And he looks at me with this blank stare and says, "What people?" He didn't see anybody at all. And that really made my stomach drop. I know what I saw. I wasn't tired or distracted, and I can still picture them clear as day. And if they weren't there, and the third coworker didn't see them, even though he was walking right behind them, then who was I looking at? Or maybe, was I the only one that could see them? My dog appeared inside after letting him out. This has happened 2 times now, and it's starting to really mess with my head. Yesterday morning started just like any other. I woke up, I fed my dog, and I let him outside. The sun was barely up, and I was still in some sort of groggy, half-awake state, trying my best to wake all the way up. I laid back down in bed, and not 2 minutes later, I hear my dog doing his little shake. It's that telltale jingle of his collar as he settles back in. He seemed to just appear there, right beside the bed, like he never left. I sat up, very confused. I had no recollection of getting out of bed and letting him back in. My door was still closed, and I didn't hear any movement in the house. I brushed it off, thinking maybe I was just tired and going through the motions without realizing. And then it happened again today, for the 2nd day in a row. This time, I was wide awake. I let him outside, and then I sat down on the couch to work on a craft project. I was focused, but alert. A few minutes later, I hear him scratch at the door. It's his usual, "Hey, let me in" signal. I decide to finish the little task that I'm doing for my project, thinking, oh, he's fine. He can wait 5 seconds while I finish this. I do, and then I stand up, I walk over to the door, but he's already inside. And nobody else is home. The door is still locked. We don't have a dog door. There's no open windows, and there's absolutely no way that he could have gotten back inside on his own. And yet, there he is. He's just wagging his tail like nothing unusual just happened. I keep telling myself that it's just my short-term memory slipping. Maybe I'm just on autopilot from letting him in and out so many times. Maybe I opened the door without consciously registering it. But I've lived here for 2 years, and ever since yesterday, this has never happened before. Twice in 2 days feels more than just like a fluke. It's weird. I feel like it's too weird to ignore now. How did a shoe reappear in the washing machine after an entire week? I have a 2-year-old, so I do laundry every single day. It's basically a second full-time job at this point. I don't even bother with the hamper anymore. I just toss everything straight into the washing machine as it comes off. Well, last week, I still had a bit of room one day, so I decided to throw in my toddler's Crocs to freshen them up. There are those bright little rubbery ones with the cartoon charms on top. They were impossible to miss. When the wash was done, I took everything out, but I only found one shoe. I shook out all the clothes, I pulled all the sleeves inside out, I even crouched down and I stuck my head halfway into the drum, checking to see if it somehow wedged itself behind one of the rims or something. But I found nothing. Just one brightly colored, lonely Croc. I figured maybe I'd only thrown one in by accident. It is incredibly easy to get distracted mid-task with a toddler around, so I tear the house apart. I checked under the furniture, inside all of the toy bins, behind the dryer, under the beds, you name it. I searched for a whole week, and I didn't find that second crock anywhere. Then, today, I finished another load of laundry, just a regular mixed load, and when I take the clothes out, there it is, the missing crock. Sitting there like it had never vanished at all. It wasn't stuck inside one of my toddler's sleeves or pants or anything. It wasn't crammed behind the drum. It was just sitting right in the middle of the drum, like it had been there the whole time. But I know for a fact that it wasn't. I've done no less than 6 loads of laundry in the last 7 days since the crock went missing. If it had been there all along, I would have seen it. Every single time I pulled laundry out, I shook the clothes, I looked very carefully, and never found it. And again, there is no hamper in this situation, so there's no pile of clothes for it to be hiding in. Everything gets washed right away. There's literally no explanation for how it could disappear and then just reappear like that. I'm trying to laugh it off, but I don't know, maybe between me and you, this situation has really unsettled part of me. Like maybe this house or this washing machine is just playing tricks on me. I don't know what to think. We made it. Let's add something to the No Way files. In 2008, a woman named Lorena Garcia woke up in her bed, in her home, with the same alarm clock buzzing beside her that always does. But something felt off. Her sheets were a different color than what she remembered. This is a small detail, sure, but it's enough to raise an eyebrow. Had she just forgotten? Had someone swapped them without her knowing? She brushes it off and she gets ready for work. This was the last normal thing that would happen to Lorena that day. Have you ever had that eerie feeling like something small is wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it? Now, imagine that feeling growing stronger the longer your day goes on. What if your life looked the same on the surface, but didn't actually belong to you anymore? That's what happened to Lorena Garcia. Lorena was a well-educated professional living in Spain. She had no mental health issues, no wild beliefs. She lived alone, worked in an office, and had been dating a man named Augustin for 7 years. She describes her life before the shift as totally normal. But when she arrived at work that morning, things just stopped making sense. She walked into the office building that she'd worked at for 20 years, and she realized that her department was gone. In its place was an entirely different division. Her name was still listed on the employee register, but she wasn't where she was supposed to be, and now she's to report to someone that she's never met before. Was this just a promotion that she forgot about? Or some sort of corporate restructure that she missed? She checked her emails, but nothing explains the change. And her coworkers look at her like she's confused. Or worse, maybe they're playing a prank. She tries to shrug it off. I mean, maybe she'd been moved without being told. Maybe she was just having a bad day. She goes home and she tries to call her boyfriend, Augustin, the man that she'd been with for nearly a decade now, and there's no answer. She calls his work, and they say nobody's ever heard of him. She checks online, and his name wasn't in any of her recent messages. So she goes to his apartment, or at least the one that she remembered him living in. But somebody else is there. Augustin doesn't exist. Lorena starts to really panic now, and she doesn't know where to turn. She calls her ex-boyfriend, and to her surprise, He answers the phone and speaks as if nothing even happened. He's talking about plans that they'd made recently, and he's reminding Lorena of conversations that she doesn't remember having. And that's when the man that she's talking to on the phone, her ex-boyfriend, says, "Babe, why are you acting so strange?" This man says they're together. Lorena begins to feel like she was the only one who noticed anything was wrong. Now, because she felt like she was losing her grip, Lorena went to a psychiatrist, and she told him everything that was happening. And his diagnosis? Stress. Possibly a false memory episode, maybe even some early signs of some sort of mental illness. So she goes through multiple rounds of testing, and nothing unusual comes up. She even calls the police, and she tries private investigators as well. She digs into records, and she searches online for any sort of clue that she can find that would prove to her in that moment that she's in a whole nother timeline now. But nothing explains the shift. Her family was all the same. Her home address hadn't changed. Her car keys worked. Her bank account was still there. But her career path, her relationships, and parts of her social life were just suddenly out of place. So what do you do when everything around you insists that you're wrong, but your memories won't let you agree? Lorena develops a theory. She believes that she's shifted into a parallel universe, one that's nearly identical to her own, but with very small differences here and there. It's a reality where some parts of her past had simply played out a little bit differently. But can that happen? Could someone just wake up in the wrong timeline? The theory isn't as far out as it sounds. In the practice of quantum mechanics, there's something called the many worlds interpretation. It's the idea that for every possible outcome of an event, a brand new universe is created. To put it a little bit simpler, every single choice you make and each moment that you experience could potentially branch into another version of reality. Say one morning you decide to have coffee instead of tea, you branch off into that coffee timeline. Some researchers, and even some fringe theorists, call this a quantum jump, a sudden switch from one timeline to another. Now, most people just say it's a metaphor, but for stories like Lorena's, they keep people wondering, what if there's more than that? Lorena Garcia's story remains one of the most well-known and honestly unsettling claims of parallel reality experiences. There's no proof that she could find. There's no physical evidence. It's just one woman insisting that her world changed overnight, and nobody else noticed. Maybe she experienced some sort of undiagnosed psychological event. Maybe there's a more mundane explanation. Or maybe she really did wake up in a version of her life that wasn't hers. If you wake up tomorrow and everything is mostly right, but some details simply don't add up, like your job title, or your relationship, or parts of your past, would you notice? Would you question it? And would anyone believe you if you brought it up to them? Or would you be like Lorena Garcia and simply live in a world that looks like home, but never feels like home? Second daughter disappeared. So I have a second cousin who's been married to his wife for about 20 years. About 7 years ago, I went to a family reunion that he, his wife, and their 2 daughters were also at. At one point, I was watching all of the kids, including my own. His daughters' names were Hannah and Haley. I spent time with those girls. I took them fishing, and my daughter remembers both of them because she was the older cousin. Well, about 2 years later, I saw a post on Facebook that they had taken Hannah to Disney World. I was confused, and I was thinking, Well, what about Haley? I've seen and taken pictures of her. My daughter remembers Haley very clearly. And they posted lots of other posts where they were doing stuff with just Hannah. So, naturally, I asked about Haley, and they both told me that they never had a daughter named Haley. I remember having a conversation with my cousin's wife about the spelling of their daughter's name, so I went back into my Google Photos to see if I could find pictures of Haley, but there were none. She wasn't there. And I know for a fact that my daughter had taken selfies with both of those daughters when they were younger, so she looked in her phone, and there was no evidence of Haley at all. No one else in the family remembers her, even though some of the pictures were of aunts and uncles and cousins with her. It's like somebody photoshopped her out of all of the pictures. I'm so confused. Like, what happened to Haley? How does this child not exist that I remember taking fishing? I even asked multiple family members if they knew any kids named Haley at all, because I thought, well, maybe she was somebody else's kid. But no one knows who she is, and even my mom says that she doesn't remember any kid with that name. What the heck? There's some questions in the comments and some insightful back and forth, and this OP includes an edit that clears some things up. They add, "To answer some questions, I noticed this about 5 years ago. I did do a deep dive into it. I Googled the events that I know we were all attending together and the people that were involved. I did find other girls with the same name, but none of them were our Haley. I went through old photos multiple times. I eventually became convinced that something happened to her and just nobody wanted to talk about it. I asked so many other cousins, uncles, aunts, and Haley's grandparents. My daughter had taken a bunch of selfies with all of her cousins because they had camped out a couple of nights in the same tent. And she was gone from all of the pictures, even the one that I had had of her and my great aunt, of just the two of them. My daughter was 14 at the time, and my son was 11, and he says he doesn't remember Haley either. Now, my cousin's wife, she did have multiple miscarriages after Hannah, and that's why they said they only have one child. So maybe Haley was just a ghost this whole time. Or maybe she was in one universe and then quietly slipped into another. Duplication glitch. A couple of weeks ago, I had purchased only one plain orange t-shirt from my local Walmart. I only bought one. It was cheap and comfy, and I liked the color. It was nothing special. I even remember debating whether to get it at all. I'm currently on vacation in New York, and I packed that exact orange shirt the night before we left. I tossed it in my suitcase along with the rest of my clothes. My mom also brought a big black trash bag for the Airbnb so that we could toss all of our dirty laundry in it during the trip. Once we got to the Airbnb, I pulled the orange shirt out of my suitcase and I wore it on one of the first days we were there. It was hot and sunny, and we walked around a ton. At one point, I even spilled Pepsi all down the front. Classic me. So I took it off when we got back, and I tossed it into the trash bag with our other dirty clothes. Well, fast forward just a few days. We're still in New York in the Airbnb, and I'm digging through my suitcase looking for another pair of pants to wear, and that's when I see something orange peeking out between a couple of other items of clothes. I pull it out, and it's the same freaking orange shirt. However, it was clean and folded and had no Pepsi stain. Now, let me be clear. This Airbnb does not have a washing machine. It's not one of those upscale places with in-unit laundry. It's a small rental, and there's never been any way to wash clothes here. No laundry room, no detergent even. Nothing. Confused, I immediately checked the trash bag where I tossed the stained shirt, and it was still there. Pepsi stain and all, crumpled up exactly the way I left it. Now at this point, I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. So I pulled out both shirts, I laid them on the bed side by side, and I called my mom into the room. I asked her, "How many shirts do you see?" And she looked, admittedly confused for a second, but she said, "I see 2 orange shirts." She said it just like that. I only ever bought 1. There should not be 2 of these. So what in the Lucky Charms is going on? Did my shirt duplicate itself? Is this an actual glitch in the Matrix? Because I know I didn't buy 2 of these, and I certainly didn't pack 2 either. I'd bet money on it. I heard glass shatter, but nothing was broken. When I was 16, I was sitting alone in my room when I suddenly heard what sounded like a glass object shattering somewhere in the house. It was loud, sharp, sudden, and very unmistakable. It was the kind of noise that makes your body jolt. My parents ran upstairs, panicked, asking if I was okay and where the crash came from. We all searched the house from top to bottom. We checked every room, every window, every mirror, and even every light bulb too. But nothing was broken. There were no shards, no cracks anywhere, and no trace of anything being out of place. We even asked the neighbors in the twin house next to us. I call it a twin house because our homes are physically connected and the walls were thin, so sound carried pretty easily. We asked them if they'd heard anything, and they looked confused and said that they didn't hear a thing. We eventually just gave up, called it weird, and moved on. Every so often, it comes up in conversation, and we all say something like, "Yeah, seriously, what was that?" But even now, 6 years later, it's still in the back of my mind. I've never found a logical explanation for it, and no glass ever turned up to be missing or broken. We don't think it was a prank. We don't have any critters anywhere. There is no plausible theory. I still wonder if something actually broke that night. Just, not in a way that we could see. Hey, it's me. I wanted to take a second to remind you that if you really enjoy the content and you're looking for ways to, show support to the channel and to me, you can do that. You can become a YouTube channel member, you can become a Spotify subscriber, or you can join the Patreon. Each of those are only $1 each. That was the least expensive version that these platforms would let me, assign for the memberships. And they all get you some combination of early access and or ad-free content. All right, let's get back to it. A jogger spawned out of thin air. So I was in my car driving, just cruising like any normal day. And as I was passing this bridge, I approached a right-hand turn. It's a turn that I take pretty often. There's nothing unusual about it. But here's the thing. The turn has a bike path running alongside it on the right. It's one of those wide, paved trails where joggers and cyclists go every morning. It's a pretty busy little stretch, especially around sunrise and early evening. So there I was, signal on, slowing down, scanning the bike path before I turned. I always glance over just to be safe, because You know, you never know when someone's going to dart out. And right as I'm about to make the turn, a woman literally appears out of thin air, with no warning. There was no gradual approach from the path, no slow fade in from my peripheral distance. It was just, pop, she's there. She was a white lady. She had brown hair. She was wearing black and white striped jogging pants and a crop top. She looked like she was mid-run. Arms were just pumping slightly. Face was very focused. But I swear, she was not on that path a second earlier. It was like a video game glitch where the character just spawns in at the last second. She wasn't out of my field of vision. She just simply wasn't there, and then she was. I was so startled, I actually slowed down way more than I needed to, trying to process what just happened. I turned to my mom, who was in the passenger seat, and I asked, "Did you see that?" She blinked and then just looked confused. And then she said, "Where did she come from?" So it wasn't just me. My mom saw it too. She appeared right next to my car, right on the path, just as we passed by. And I'm not talking a jogger rounding a corner. There was nowhere for her to have even come from, and no time for her to have gotten that close without us seeing her approach. And no, before you ask, I wasn't tired. I wasn't under the influence or distracted. I was totally clear-headed, eyes on the road, and alert. I still think about it. Was it a glitch, you think? Some weird time slip? Or a momentary overlap of something that we're not meant to see? Because I swear, she just spawned in. Ghost or glitch? I just had another occurrence this morning after yesterday's syrup incident. And just for those that are curious, because I know not everybody binges every episode when it comes out, but the syrup incident story happens in the episode that's released right before this one, if you're curious. It's crazy. Anyway, I was driving to work early, same way as always, same turns, all the same traffic lights, and the same stretch of sleepy houses and barely awake streets. The sky was still that hazy pre-dawn gray, the kind that makes everything look slightly washed out and a little bit surreal. When, out of nowhere, a red car drove past me in the opposite direction. The woman driving the car looked right at me, and it wasn't like she glanced or anything. I mean, she locked eyes with me and smiled. But it didn't feel like a warm smile. It was weird. Like too wide, too deliberate. It was the kind of expression that instantly makes your skin crawl. Like you're suddenly the punchline to a private joke that you don't understand. Naturally, I glanced in my rearview mirror, trying to catch a better look. Maybe I'd recognize the car or the woman, but they were both gone. And I mean totally gone. There was now no car in my rearview mirror. No sign of taillights. I didn't even hear the engine roar away. Just an empty road behind me. I felt this jolt go through my entire body. It was like my nervous system just rebooted. I got full body chills, my hands start to shake, and I actually started to tear up. Not out of fear, exactly, but from this deep, unsettling disbelief, like my brain couldn't process what it had just seen. Did I see a ghost? Or was this another glitch? Maybe she wasn't real at all. I don't know, but I've never felt this disturbed from something so quick and so simple. I know I'm not crazy, but I definitely am shaken. Has anyone else experienced anything like this? Because any insight would be appreciated. Somebody in the comments adds, I often see on this subreddit people who are sure about the nature of glitches. I mean, you'll hear about vibrations and time slips, but the fact is, nobody actually knows. Now, I personally don't believe in ghosts, although I may never really know, but that wouldn't help me solve your particular glitch. But I do think that the smile she gave you might be significant. I think it implies that whatever is behind this is fully aware of you. I've had an unsettling smile from a stranger, and it tripped me out more than I could ever explain. OP responds with, yes, this is what I'm talking about. It felt like she was aware of me, and that was the scariest part. Thank you for that insight. I just needed to see it in words from somebody else. I saw him in 20 years. From Christy. My partner and I were getting in bed the other night. He was getting in on his side, and he stopped and sat on the edge just for a second. He looked over at me and simply smiled, very lovingly. For whatever reason, there was a quick shift, and as I was looking at him, like a flash, he morphed into an older version of himself. I watched his face mature, but it was still absolutely him. His hair was a little bit longer, and it was starting to gray. And even his corrective lenses had changed, but were still in a similar style. It was only for like a millisecond, but it was so real. He was smiling at me. And I saw him 20 years from now in just a similar moment. My heart almost skipped a beat, and he could tell that I was suddenly shaken up, but I waved it off. I don't smoke or do any hallucinogens, and I don't drink. I do take medication, but it's for anxiety, and I don't know, man. I cannot explain what happened, but I swear, I saw him 20 years from now. That story was posted to the internet 5 years ago. I got in touch with the original author, her name is Christy, and she's let me know that the partner that she was mentioning in the story and her are now recently married. Lost object strangely reappears. A month ago, I made a locket using a glass coffin case, and I filled it with 2 skull charms and a cross. I decided to wear it one night out, and I accidentally opened it. Of course, the 2 skull charms fell out, and rearranging them was tricky, so I just put them back in my pocket. Once I got home later that night, I pulled my keys out from that same pocket, and I felt one of the charms fall out with them, and I even heard the sound of something tiny fall and bounce on the concrete. When I got inside, I checked, and sure enough, I was missing one of the skulls. I looked outside with the flashlight, but I couldn't find it. I figured it was just lost for good. A week later, I changed into pajama shorts that were in my closet, and I felt something in the pockets. When I reached in there to pull something out, to my surprise, it was my missing skull charm. They somehow ended up falling out of my pants pocket that night, and then reappeared in my pajama shorts that were in my closet the whole time? I'll never be able to figure that one out. How did they just reappear there like that? Somebody asks, did you ever only have 2 skull charms, or were they part of a bigger set? OP responds with, they were originally a pair of earrings that I had clipped the hooks off of, and there was only ever 2 the whole time. Glitch or not, It felt like a Ripley's Believe It or Not thing. So, the other day, I was driving home from work, and there's a part of the road where I pass by my mate's place, and I always look to see if he's home. You know, as you do. It's just a quick glance at the driveway to check for his car. It's a little ritual at this point, and I've probably done it over 100 times. Right after his place, there's a set of traffic lights with a speed camera, and I always slow down there just in case. Even if I'm not speeding, I still hit the brakes a little. It's a habit. That camera up there makes me cautious. I remember doing it that day too. I passed his place, glanced like usual, and then slowed down for the speed cam like always, and continued on driving. Then, suddenly, everything started to feel wrong. I don't even know how to describe it properly. It was like this strange wave just comes over me, like I blinked and the world shifted. My head felt light, time didn't feel right, and then, boom. Somehow, I was back on the road from earlier. Not just by his house again, I was like well before it, like several kilometers back. It was like reality just rewound itself, like I was stuck in some invisible time loop and forced to drive the same stretch of road again. And I did the exact same routine. I drove past my buddy's place, I peered over, and then I slowed down for the speed cam. Deja vu hitting me like a punch in the chest. I was so shocked, and I know 100%, without a doubt, that I'd already passed that part of the road. There was no forgetting it, no maybe. I did it, and then I did it again. Was it a glitch in the Matrix? Maybe a hiccup in time? Or something else? I have no idea, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since it happened. What do you think? Hand simulation. This is super short, and I also don't remember exactly how it looked, but I just wanted to know if this has happened to anybody else. So, I was on my 15-minute break, and my hand was resting on a table that I was sitting at. It was just a normal moment, nothing out of the ordinary. The room was quiet, and I felt calm. And then my vision changed. Everything looked somewhat pixelated and floaty. It was like reality got downgraded for a few seconds, like the resolution of everything just dropped. I lifted my hand and looked at it, and the vision continued. Then, suddenly, everything went back to normal. All lasting about 4 seconds, which is long if you think about it. Now, not only my hand, but everything. But still, my hand was the main thing in my focus. I didn't feel dizzy at all. I don't think I was tired, and I hadn't taken anything unusual. I just remember sitting there in stunned silence, trying to decide if I should tell someone or just shake it off. It almost felt like I got a peek behind the curtain of something, and I was the only one who noticed. I really wish that I could explain this better, or draw it, or remember how it looked. I'm just curious if anyone has seen this before. It freaked me out, and I was just scrolling through this subreddit and remembered this moment. It was from about 3 years ago. Glowing control panel on the column. It was 3 a.m. I was in the kitchen, drinking a glass of water before finally heading to bed. It was dark, but there was light coming from the second floor through the stairs, just enough for me to see where I was walking. I was about to head upstairs when I saw something in my peripheral vision. It was glowing. I turned my head slightly to the right, and it quickly disappears. I shrugged my shoulders and was about to head upstairs once more when I saw it again, and this time, I couldn't just chalk it up to my mind playing tricks on me. It was a glowing panel made of light with buttons and an input box right below the column. It was only there for a second, and as soon as I blinked, it disappeared. I immediately rushed over to the column like a crazy person, pressing the buttons where I saw them earlier. And once I started to calm back down, I started thinking rationally. Maybe it was a reflection from another appliance or something, which could be. Opposite of the column is a broken gas stovetop oven. It hasn't been used for a long time though. And aside from the appliance, there's nothing else that can possibly create that kind of light. So what in the world did I just see? "3 days to midnight." This is a story passed down to me by my great-aunt Ruby when I was old enough to understand. I was sitting on the living room floor, playing with my Hot Wheels, while a small group of older family members sat around talking when the subject came up. I was allowed to just sit in and listen. It was my great-aunt Ruby who recounted the event from her point of view. It's a story about when Aunt Ruby and her younger sister, Susie, who's my grandmother, shared a small house in their younger years down on 18th Street. The house was left to them by their mother, who's my great-grandmother. I never got to meet her. The story goes that Grandma Susie was in a near-fatal vehicular accident, and her apparition was seen walking down the street towards that house just after midnight on that very same night. She was walking home. There was never any explanation for what they saw or why they think they saw it. But as I grew older, I came to understand what's meant by the term OBE, or out-of-body experiences. It's a phenomenon worth looking into. Here's how the story goes. That wonky old intersection. You know, the one at Main Street and Commercial that looks more like an X than it does a cross. I remember what happened when they switched that traffic light to switch from red, yellow, and green to just a flashing yellow at the stroke of midnight so as not to inconvenience those out-of-towners just passing through. Well, it did just the opposite one night. That night, when Susie and her girlfriends went out for a girls' night and almost didn't come back. In fact, it was Susie, the one we all know and love, who gave up the ghost. Literally. And I still get the willies just thinking about it. I remember when the girls rolled up in front of the house in that old sedan to pick her up. They honked the horn a couple of times to let her know they were here. Susie rushed to get her sweater on, and I scolded her for wearing that little white miniskirt. She didn't pay me no mind though, as she put on her scarf and hurried through the door. I followed her out onto the porch, waving at the girls that were waiting for her in the car. I watched as my little sister clambered into the back of that big old 4-door sedan, all full of giggling college girls getting ready to go out and do who knows what in this nosy little town. Probably on their way to Club 18, where a lot of those military boys go to hook up with the ladies while home on leave, or just a weekend pass. And that little white miniskirt that she wore made me cringe. But I knew that Susie had her head on straight. She wasn't a drinker, and I thank Mama for that. God rest her soul. Susie said they wanted to catch a movie before heading over to hit the nightclubs. As for me, I didn't have a car. I didn't like being all alone in that house too much either since Mama died. So I decided to call my friend Maggie across the street to see if she was home. She was, so I grabbed a big mason jar full of sun tea that I had brewed earlier and I took it on over to her house to sit on the front porch and gossip a bit, as we were inclined to do, you know? But I had lost track of time as we sat there reminiscing and catching up on all of the latest goings-on around town, when I noticed a person walking down the sidewalk across the street in our direction. I glanced down at my watch, and it was just past midnight. Now, who in their right mind would be walking down the street at 1:15 midnight? Then, by the light of the moon, I could make out that it was Susie. I could tell by that same white miniskirt that was now coming into view. She didn't have any expression on her face at all, just this eerie, deadpan look. So, I'm thinking, what in the grits with bacon bits? That's Susie. I called out to her, trying not to wake the neighbors, but it was as though she didn't even hear me. She just kept walking right up to the house. Maggie, the one that I was visiting across the street, sees her and she says, "What's Susie doing walking home at midnight?" I just shrugged and I shook my head. By then, Susie was on the porch and was letting herself in. I got up to go and meet with her with the intention of finding out. I gathered my things, I bid Maggie goodnight, and then I walked down the porch steps and across the street to the house. When I walked into the house, the first thing that I noticed were there were no lights on. I called out for Susie, but I got no reply. The house was dark and quiet, and I just scratched my head and kind of walked around the house calling her name several times before the phone starts ringing. When I answered the phone, I felt numb. My dang hand was shaking so bad. It was the police chief, Larry Harper. Well, he told me that Susie had just been admitted to the county hospital after the girls got into a car crash down at that damn intersection when the lights were flashing yellow. I didn't know what to think. I almost told the cop that I just saw my sister walk into the house after what he just told me. But at the last second, I changed my mind. I simply said, "Thank you, officer," and then I hung up the phone. By then, I was about ready to have a nervous breakdown. That's when I called Maggie back to let her know what just happened, but I couldn't make any sense of it. And of course, she was as confused as I was, having just seen Susie walk in like that just a couple of minutes ago. I told her I would explain it as best as I could on the way to the hospital, so we jumped into her car and we headed over there. When we got there, we met up with the doctor that was seeing Susie, and she said that she had suffered a serious concussion and several other injuries when a truck ran through the intersection at the same time the girls had. That truck ran smack dab into the side of the car that Susie was on. Susie was left in a coma for 3 days before she came around. I was at her bedside when she woke up. And man, I was so happy to see that she'd made it through. The first thing she wanted to know was how her friends were. I told her that, except for a few minor cuts and bruises, they were all okay, and that she had taken the brunt of it for them. I knew her ribs hurt too much for her to laugh, but she squeezed my hand, and then she let go as the resident nurse came in to tend to her. So, my grandma Susie went on to make a full recovery, and that traffic light down on Main Street and Commercial got changed back to the way it was shortly after. But I had one question still to ask Aunt Ruby. I was only 9 at the time, but I really needed to know. Did Grandma Susie remember walking home? And the answer made my jaw drop. She said that all Grandma Susie remembered was talking to Mama, who stood in what seemed like a tunnel with a bright light behind her. She was wearing the same dress that she wore the day that she died. And Mama simply said, "Go home now, Susie. Turn around and go home." guess where we are? We're on the intersection of no and way. That was lame. Let's add something to the no way files. Meadow Cottage in Dawdleston, England, was an 18th century brick-stone cottage-style house owned by a man named Ken Webster. Dating back many centuries, the house was bound to have a ton of secrets hidden deep within its foundations. But Ken was to find that the ghosts of Meadow Cottage weren't peaceful. They reached out to him from the past with accusations and admonishments, but they used cutting-edge technology to do so. The first signs were unnatural activity in the cottage. Examples include six-toed footprints in the dust that seemed to walk up the walls of the cottage. Now, at first, Ken and his girlfriend dismissed the footprints as a prank. Meadow Cottage was in the middle of renovation and repair at the time, and Ken Webster took a bucket of paint and he just decided to paint over the footprints when they failed to come off after cleaning the walls. After that, Ken Webster believed he was done with the footprints for good. However, to his shock and surprise, the six-toed footprints resurfaced again in the exact same place. There were more eerie incidents too that go unexplained even as of today. Ken and the other inhabitants of the house would go on to experience sudden gusts of cold winds. They would also see shadows moving around, and they would feel the presence of an invisible entity around the house. They even found tins of cat food stacked on top of each other like a pyramid. But things went further when the ghosts tried to communicate directly with Ken. In doing so, they used the most suitable nearby technology. That was Ken's home computer. The messages, which poured out of Ken's computer from this unknown source, became known as the Dawdleston messages. Now, Ken couldn't make much of the messages because they were misspelled in Old English and they were very cryptic, almost like riddles. The grammar used in the messages was also very unusual, and this offered the first clue. Ken and the others who read the messages started to believe that they came from the distant past, and this was seemingly confirmed when the entity who was displaying these messages on Ken's computer claimed to be from the year 1546. The messages started coming in when Ken borrowed the computer from his school, where he taught, and he kept the computer at his home. At first, he thought whoever wrote the messages must have pre-written them and then just stored them on the computer. But it was when the spirit accused Ken and his girlfriend of stealing its house that they understood that the entity had been living with them for quite some time. In fact, they realized that the entity might be part of the history of the place. The first message that the couple received from the computer was asking about the two of them and their identity. It was as if the entity could see who the two were, but didn't place a name on them until the two told their names. The first Dawdleston messages weren't easy to understand. However, being delivered in the form of a cryptic poem that was ominous and difficult to interpret. It was unlike anything Ken and Debbie had ever read. The deep yet cryptic poem talked about nightmares, fame, growth, and death, as if summing up life and death in one poem. After the first message, there was nothing for a couple of days. However, the second message came shortly after, and it was written in this archaic English. This message called Ken a worthy man, and Debbie, his girlfriend, a fanciful woman, as if the entity admired them. But the crux of the message was scolding them for taking the entity's house. The entity even calls them out directly on the perceived theft, which is a great crime in its eyes. On the other hand, It also shows confusion as to modern fittings in the house, writing about, quote, the light the devil makes that Ken and Debbie use, which was just the lamp in the room. When it's studied closely, it's seen that the entity must be talking about the electricity and all of the electric lights and the other devices in the house. Since the entity claimed to date back to the mid-1500s, where there was no electricity or power, it's very possible that the concept of electricity baffled the entity and also harmed it, which is why the light was called that of the devil. In this second message, the entity starts out by saying that it writes on behalf of many. It might mean that there are other entities in the house too, and that this is only the first one to talk to them. It might also mean that it's taking on behalf all of the spirits in the world or around the area. But the confusing nature of the messages means that there are many meanings and interpretations hidden within them. The messages were signed as LW, and paranormal investigators who were called in came up with the name of Lucas for the entity. And what's odd is the style that the entity wrote the messages in matched the time and the regional dialect that the entity mentioned they were from. However, the Dottleston messages, they didn't end there. They eventually became a series of messages that continued to appear over a period of more than a year. The big question here is who really wrote the Dottleston messages? Throughout that time, when Ken and Debbie were contacted by the entity and also conversed with it, the two humans tried to ask about who it was, where it was from, and about its background. And although the answers did tell them more about the entity itself, it would knowingly present false information to see if Ken and Debbie would call it out, almost as if to confirm that Ken and Debbie really were from the year they said they were from. Research into the messages and further studies suggested that the entity's real identity was Thomas Hardin, who was a vicar in his past life. He was a resident of Gloucestershire in the 1550s. The story of Dottleston's messages became more complex when the entity mentioned the year 2109 and how it thought Ken and Debbie also belonged to the future year. After that, the couple started getting messages from 2109 where the pronoun was they in the plural. These confusing messages could really be interpreted any way the reader would choose to. Were the Dottleston messages from the future, or were they from the past? Or were the messages merely just a computer glitch? Did Ken fake the entire thing just to sell a book and profit from the gullibility of the public? Nobody knows. But maybe that'll change one day. Here's a time slip that I experienced many years ago. I've never told this story before, but I've been thinking a lot about it recently, and I wondered if anyone else had something similar happen to them. It's one of those things that just sits quietly in the back of my mind, and it has for years. It started when I was a lad, maybe about 10 or 11. I was sat on a huge bus going down a hill on my way home from a friend's house. It was late afternoon, golden hour, and the light was casting these long shadows on the pavement as we passed by familiar houses and corner shops. I looked out of the window to my right and, shockingly, I saw me, but older, walking up the hill. And it was more than just, a passing resemblance. It was very unmistakably me. I had the same bone structure, the same walk, even the way I tucked my hands into my coat pockets. The expression on his face, or I guess I should say my face, was oddly calm. And for a second, we both stopped and we looked directly at each other, and then, just like that, he was gone. I must have stared out that window for the rest of the ride, trying to find him again, trying to convince myself that I'd just seen a trick of the light or something, or maybe a stranger with a coincidental likeness. For the next few weeks, I thought about this constantly. I wondered if I just saw a doppelganger. I wondered if I imagined the whole thing. I just couldn't make sense of it. I even remember drawing it in my school notebook, trying to capture the weirdness of the moment in case I ever needed, to prove it to myself later or something. Then, about 10 years later, I find myself walking up that same hill. It was an ordinary day. It was cold, I think, but nothing out of the unusual. Until I saw a bus coming down the hill, and suddenly, I knew what was about to happen. The feeling was honestly indescribable. Just this wave of anticipation and déjà vu hit me like a punch. I didn't know whether to stop or keep walking, but something told me just to hold my pace. As the bus passes, I look in the window, and there he is. Younger me. He sat in the exact same seat, looking out the window, locking eyes with me just like before. And in a second, the bus had vanished. Just gone. At least now I know what I saw was real. But why and how could this be possible? Was it a time loop? Maybe a dimensional overlap or something? I've racked my brain trying to understand it for years now. I've been back to that place many times since, just to see if anything triggers, but, sadly, it does not. I'll never forget the certainty in that moment, though, and how real it felt, how grounded it was in all 5 senses. That was me. And somehow, I saw myself both before and after. I'm not crazy. Okay, so this just happened, and it seems small and maybe a bit silly, but I feel like I need to tell somebody. So, I'm sitting outside, and I have my phone leaning on a half-full, closed water bottle. I was recording myself while smoking a cigarette. I had a cup with some past smoked cigarettes sitting beside it, and then I put the cigarette I was smoking in the cup, but it didn't fully go out. So, I removed the water bottle that was holding my phone up, and I open it, and then I pour some of the water into the plastic cup. I still had the cap from the water bottle in my left hand, and I guess I look away for a millisecond or something, but I sit the water bottle down, and it's closed. There's a whole nother cap on there now, and I swear, I'm not crazy. I even tried to pour the water bottle again in the cup to see if the lid was just broken or something, and water could still come out, and maybe I was just holding another lid for some reason. But no. This water bottle is fully closed, and that makes no sense because I know for a fact I didn't close the lid, because I still have it in my hand. I don't know, man. I'm so confused. I wish my phone caught that on video instead of whatever I was recording. But when I removed the water bottle that my phone was leaning on, my phone fell and it started recording the ceiling. I'm really trying to come up with some sort of explanation, like, how could this happen? I honestly have no clue. Somebody in the comments says, you know what that means? Somewhere, somebody's water bottle lid just vanished, and they're just as confused as you are. Appearing bracelet. So, I have this bracelet from a local store I like. It's called Catbird. I wear charms on it, and about a month ago, the bracelet broke. The links all separated. I was aggravated, but I put it aside for a week, and then I emailed the makers. They said, send it back and they'd fix it. I put it aside again, and I planned on sending it out this weekend. This bracelet has a lot of sentimental value to me, and I was annoyed because, well, for one, I broke it, but I also wear it daily. It feels like a part of my identity. Well, today, I went to box it, and next to the broken bracelet was the same bracelet, only not broken. I hadn't reordered the bracelet yet, and my husband definitely didn't either. I even checked my order history to make sure I didn't miss a purchase or something. I was tearing through old email receipts just in case I'd forgotten, placing a duplicate order, but I didn't find anything. My husband was just as confused as I was. I'm currently wearing the bracelet. I'm freaked out, but it's cool, I guess. I mean, it's just a $60-ish silver link bracelet, but it's the same one, with the same catbird stamp on it as well. It even looks like it's a little worn, just like the broken one was. What's really strange is that the broken one is obviously still here too, and they're identical. I keep wondering, did my first bracelet somehow just, fix itself? Or did it duplicate? I'm a believer in glitches, but this is crazy. Hey, it's me. I want to ask you something a little bit strange. Do you have a favorite weird smell? Let me know in the comments. And I guess I'll go first. One of my favorite weird smells, one that I share with Mrs. Weber, is brand new electronics. We were fortunate enough to come across a Nintendo Switch 2, and she's setting it up in the living room with, the kids, and I go to another part of the house. I don't know, I think I'm throwing something away or grabbing an extension cord or something, and then I can hear her yell for me to come back quick. And when I do, I come back to the room that her and the kids are in, and she's like covering the box. She's hovering over the box, and she's like hugging it really tight. She says, "Come over here now." And when I do, she rips open the Switch package. She gets a whiff of like the dock that it comes with. She says, "Hey, you got to get a whiff of this." So I do. So that's new electronics. It's one of our favorite weird smells. My experience with polo shirts. I've been involved in esotericism for over 13 years, so I'm no stranger to weirdness. Unexplained phenomena, strange synchronicities, bizarre occurrences, I think I've seen my fair share. But what happened with my archery uniform still stands out to me. It was so subtle, yet so physical, and so impossible that I'm still scratching my head. I'm a member of an archery club. We have a strict uniform. It's a red polo shirt. Mine is size large, and it has an embroidered club logo over the heart, and our club code stitched onto the back and on both sleeves. We pair that with black pants, featuring a printed logo on the right thigh. Now, when I use this outfit, I always wear the same full set together, never one piece without the other. After I use them, I wash both of the items, and then I hang them up to dry. Then I place them on the hanger in my closet. I do this like clockwork. Always together, always the same process. One morning, I woke up early to get ready for a demonstration. I went to grab my uniform, my shirt and my pants, from the same hanger that they always are on, and I realized my polo shirt had vanished. So, worried, I checked the laundry basket, I checked on my shelves, even looked behind everything. I tore my closet apart and found nothing. The following week, I accepted the loss and I asked the club to order me a new shirt, but this one in a size medium since I'd recently lost some weight. It eventually shows up and I continue to follow my same habits. Wash them together, hang it up on the same hanger, and put them in my closet. Weeks passed, and I didn't wear the uniform at all during that time because we didn't have any demonstrations or exhibitions or anything. And nothing unusual happened until the morning of my next competition. I opened the closet, I reached for the hanger that's always there, and I immediately froze. Hanging there was not one polo shirt, but two. They were both fully embroidered, both looking completely identical, but they're both in a size large. I triple-checked the labels. I checked the closet and the laundry. I was hoping that this was some mix-up or some confusion. The shirt had gone missing weeks ago, but now it's returned. I didn't dream this, and I know I didn't hallucinate this either. I know this sounds, kind of small compared to some other wild stories on here, but just the whole precision of it, the logic-defying switch, that's what gets me. How does something disappear, get replaced, and then swap itself out again weeks later without a trace? Has anyone ever experienced anything similar, where an item is lost and then replaced, but then the original item comes back? Because if shirts are now teleporting, I'm not sure what reality we're living in anymore. Consistently finding a 1 lira coin under a tree without fail. I was out doing some deliveries. I dropped off the packages and decided to stop by the field. It's a quiet place, it's open and mostly empty. On one side, there's a cobnut bush. On the other, there's a small grove of trees, and the remaining two sides are bordered by a walking path. But the center of the field is where it gets interesting. There's a single large tree surrounded by tall grass. Not many people go out to it. It's a bit inconvenient to reach, so it really is rare to see anyone near it, except for the occasional dog tearing through the field. On this day, I decided to visit the tree. I like checking on the insect life there. It's usually buzzing with activity. I saw one of the iridescent beetles that flips itself like a spring-loaded toy. I flipped it a few times, naturally. Then I found a green and red spider hiding in a hole. Now near the base of the tree, I checked out an ant colony that was hard at work dragging a dead fly into their nest. There are two large roots sticking out of the base of the tree. One of them houses that same ant colony, and the other is just plain dirt. And that's where I spotted a 1 lira coin. It was partially embedded in the dry soil, lightly dusted, like it had been sitting there a while. I considered it lucky. In Polish tradition, when you find a coin, you huff on it 3 times, and then you put it in your left pocket. So I did that, and I carried on to check the cobnut bush. The next day, I came back to catch some Pokemon. I'm playing Pokemon Go, by the way. It's still fun. There's a Pokestop at the tree. While I was there, I figured I'd check that same spot again. There's another 1 lira coin in the same place. It looked like it was the same dusting coin from yesterday. I did the same thing that I did, I huffed 3 times, and I put it in my left pocket. I started visiting daily after that, partly for the nuts, and partly for curiosity. And sure enough, nearly every time that I checked, there was a 1 lira coin in the same spot, with the same layer of dust, and always the same coin. And what I mean by that is it had the same year stamped on it. There's the same tiny scratch at the top corner of it. I've now collected a full jar of them. They're all identical. Same coin, over and over. There's even a light layer of dirt building up at the bottom of the jar from the coins. I've checked them all very closely. They have the same year of minting, they have the same wear marks. All of them. I'm not sure what to call this, though. Is it a glitch? Or a loop? Maybe some weird corner of the simulation has a refresh error and just keeps dropping me a duplicate every day? Whatever it is, I'm not complaining. I'm planning to use these coins to buy a used bike, and whatever's left after that, I'll just put towards a tape drive to add to my vintage server gear collection. And after that, I'll invest in some old storage media to hang on the wall. But for now, I can't stop thinking about it. Has anybody else ever found a money glitch spot like this? I've asked this person to send me a picture of their jar of coins, and I'll keep you updated here if they do. Items disappearing and then reappearing in new house. My husband and I moved into a new home last month, and we've both had an item inexplicably disappear from their spot and then reappear. A couple weeks ago, we were hanging out outside, and I was wearing sunglasses when the sun started to set, so I took my sunglasses off and I put them in the kitchen junk drawer. The next morning, I went to grab them from the drawer, but they weren't there. My husband and I looked everywhere. I took every single item out of that kitchen junk drawer and I put everything back in, and my sunglasses were nowhere to be found. The next morning, my husband opens the same drawer and pulls out my sunglasses. I was shocked. My husband swears up and down that he did not put my sunglasses in that drawer. And besides, he was helping me look for them just the day before. And we had no guests over between me taking everything out of the drawer and then them reappearing the next day. The other item is a very specific sweatshirt that my husband loves. It's a discontinued Lululemon sweatshirt that he bought secondhand and only has one of. When we moved last month, he brought it in the U-Haul with him and hadn't remembered seeing it since. I brushed it off and assumed it was somewhere in the house. Days go by, and he's brought it up a lot. I know he's bummed that he can't find his sweatshirt, so I help him look all over the house, several times actually. I've watched him go through all of the clothes hanging in the closet multiple times, and I personally have also gone through all of the clothes hanging in the closet too, and I can attest that it was not ever hanging in the closet. Well, guess what? Just a few days ago, he calls me into the closet, and with a shocked look on his face, he says, "Look." It was the sweatshirt, just hanging up in the middle of the closet. I don't know, it kind of feels like our timeline is simply adjusting to being in a new house in a new state, and a few of our favorite items are jumping from one dimension to another. Do we have a friendly yet stylish ghost who borrows our things? I do have sage that I bought, and I plan to sage our house with it. I just haven't done it yet. But now Now I'm wondering if I should hurry up and do that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. "2D cow and repeated vehicles on a road trip." I'll never forget this. I've made the I-70 trip west through Kansas to Denver several times. One of those times, I was driving alone and looking at the scenery somewhere near Garden City. It's known for having a lot of livestock and literally smelling like cow poo. On a grassy hill, right off of the highway, was a black figure in the shape of a cow. I watched it as I got closer, and the cow didn't move. Sometimes you'll see these flat 2D iron sculptures in the shape of cows or cowboys or wagons, stuff like that in this area. I thought it was just one of those. But all of a sudden, it starts moving. It was almost like the cow was coming out of the black shape. And then the cow takes off running. And I was thinking, did I really just see that? Then, I noticed some familiar vehicles I had passed on the road earlier. I was passing again. Now, these are very distinguishable vehicles, so there's no chance that they were just, duplicates. One was an orange Hummer. I mean, how often do you see those? And the other was a big construction work truck of some sort. I think there were other repeated cars as well, but this happened years ago. I always thought the talk of being in a simulation was crazy until I took this trip. A strange light during a power outage. This happened a little over a week ago. At about 7 p.m., we lost power due to a bad thunderstorm. As day turned into night, it was obvious the power wasn't coming back on for a while. I live in the woods, and I have a good view of the city. Everyone went to bed at about 9:30 that night, as there was really nothing else to do. Around 11 p.m., unable to sleep due to the heat, I walked into the hallway and I looked out at the city lights. While most of the city was dark too, I was hopeful to see some lights come back on, as light in the city meant power was getting fixed. While standing there, I saw car headlights move across the wall. I looked out the window, but no car was there, nor should there have been one. My driveway has an iron gate that runs across it, and it only opens if someone has the gate code. Furthermore, I would have seen the car. An hour later, I went back into the hallway just to see if I would see those lights again. And around 5 minutes later, they reappeared. But the light didn't move at first. I go downstairs to get a better look, and again, I see nothing. The light then moves up the wall, and then it disappeared. The light looked and acted a lot like car headlights do, but like I said, there was no car in my driveway or around my house that would have caused my hallway to light up like that. I also live up a hill away from the main road, and I can't see cars on the road from my house, so it wasn't anyone driving on the highway. What were those lights? Breaking news. I've just heard back from Laundryman 2008, the person who was finding those lira coins underneath that tree. In regards to me asking for a photo of the jar, he replies, "Unfortunately, I'd spent the entire jar on a new tape drive, but I can say that it amounted to about 80 lira, which is almost all I needed to buy the drive." No picture, folks. I then asked him to send me a photo of the tape drive. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't do that. Let's keep going. The train station that never was. Back in 2018, I was homeless in Los Angeles. To get through the nights, I used to take what I called the bus joyrides. I'd ride the city buses for hours, just to sleep, honestly. The buses were the safest place that I had. When you're knocked out in a seat, people don't think you're homeless. They just think you're exhausted from work. Santa Monica was my go-to. From downtown, it was about an hour bus ride. And if traffic was heavy, even better. It's more time to rest. I'd do that loop 3 times, and then the sun starts coming up. Then I'd hit the gym just to take a shower and get on with my day. Then I'd hit the gym to shower and get on with my day. That was my system. The 720 was the express line on Wilshire. The 20 was the regular, but it didn't go all the way to Santa Monica. It stopped at Westwood. There were other lines too. The 704 and the 4 ran on Santa Monica Boulevard, the 733 and the 33 on Venice, and the E-line train ran separately from those. And I knew all of them like the back of my hand. When the goal is survival, you learn the grid. One night, I had a couple of drinks. Not a lot though. I was at the stop, waiting, and nothing came for a while. Then, finally, the 20 pulled up. I figured this is not ideal, but, I'll take it. About 20 minutes in, the driver made an announcement. Due to mechanical issues, the bus is going out of service early. Last stop is Wilshire. Next stop. That was a problem. That meant no Westwood, no Santa Monica, and less sleep for me. We all get off the bus. We're frustrated. I'm tired, and I'm not really paying attention to where I was. I remember a hotel, and there were 2 people out front just talking to each other. I don't know, maybe it was a doorman and a guest. I started walking down Wilshire, maybe 3 minutes tops, and then I saw it. A train platform was just there. On Wilshire, there were people waiting, and I think I assumed it was the E-line. I thought I saw the blue logo that's always there. I didn't stop to check the station name. I was too tired, I think, honestly. The train shows up, I get on, and I pass out. When I wake up, I'm in Santa Monica. Eventually, months pass. I become more stable. I get my bearings again, and slowly, something starts to bother me. I'd been to every E-line stop by then, and none of them looked like the one that I saw that night. And the E-line, by the way, it doesn't run on Wilshire. It runs almost 2 miles south of there. That night, I walked for 3 minutes on Wilshire, and I did not cross 2 miles of city during that 3-minute walk. So where the hell was that train station? And the more I thought about it, the more it haunted me. The station didn't exist. At least, not in this version of reality. Here's what I think. The world that we all live in is a simulation. It's a grid. It's a loop that we're just stuck in. The system runs the same scenes over and over, with the same bus stops and the same streets, the same daily patterns. But every now and then, the algorithm slips. The loop glitches, and when it does, that's when you and I get to catch a glimpse of something that isn't supposed to be there. That train station on Wilshire, it wasn't for me to find, but I still did. Then the system reset, and now it's gone. Pikelets appeared. I bought an 8-pack of pre-made pikelets. They're like these mini man cakes, and I ate 6 of them with my baby over the course of a couple of days. Yesterday, there were 2 left. I distinctly remember trying to teach my baby how to reach into the bag to get one out, and she failed. I took one out for her and thought it was a bit rubbery, a bit of a choking hazard, maybe. So I took the other pikelet out, and same thing. They go off rather quickly, so I gave her one with a bit of jam and put the other back in the bag and into the cupboard with a mental note to buy some more. I didn't put the bag clip thing back on though. I didn't bother. I knew that lone rubbery pikelet would end up in the bin anyway. I was just being lazy. Later on in the day, when I was wiping down the kitchen counter, I threw away the clip. I bought some more yesterday afternoon, and now this morning, I was going through the cupboard, pulling out bits and pieces to feed her for breakfast, and I saw a bag of pikelets with 4 left. Now, my immediate thought is that my partner had eaten 4 out of the new bag. But no. The new bag was directly behind the 4 pikelets. And the bag with 4 pikelets now had an expiration date of today on it. And the new bag has an expiration date of 2 days from today. They are 100% the 2 bags that I've purchased recently. For a bit more context, I haven't bought pre-made pikelets in over a year. These are the only 2 bags we've had in this house since then. The expiration date is printed on the clip, and the clip was in the bag. I remember throwing that clip away. I can't check the bin because it's bin day today, and I've already taken the trash out and took the wheelie bin down the street. So where did these pikelets come from? And no, I'm absolutely not going to eat them. Spooky portal pikelets. My sister's necklace from the 80s. My sister came over to our parents' house recently with a mission, and that was to find her old plastic charm necklace from high school. It's this bright, clunky thing. It was totally 80s. She swore it had a little frying pan charm with an egg in it, a little tiny bicycle, and a bunch of other random trinkets. It's just one of those nostalgic pieces that made her light up, just thinking about it. She hadn't lived at home in years. She's 11 years older than me. So we tore through every box together, every drawer, and every closet that she used to occupy. We dug through dusty bins. We flipped through as many yearbooks as we could get our hands on. We even opened that weird drawer that nobody ever uses. And nothing. She was really bummed, and honestly, I was bummed for her. It felt like a piece of her childhood had just evaporated. The very next day, something strange happens. I'm scrolling through estate sale listings on an app when one thing caught my eye. I couldn't explain why exactly, but I just had this gut feeling that I needed to go see it. It was a full hour away, and normally I'd never drive that far just to browse through strangers' old junk, but I went anyway. I get there, and I wander through the garage. It was packed floor to ceiling with plastic drawers and crates of arts and crafts tools and stuff. The kind of hoarder chaos where you don't even know where to start. I walked straight over to a plastic drawer unit. I randomly opened the very first drawer, and guess what I see? A plastic charm necklace from the 80s, exactly like the one my sister had described the day before. It had the frying pan with the egg, a tiny bicycle, and it was just sitting there in this tangled little pile, like it was waiting for me to find it. There was no way that I was leaving without this thing. I didn't care if it had a price tag or not. I gently slid it into my pocket. I didn't intend to steal it, but I just had this feeling that if I asked, somebody would say, "Oh, that's not for sale," and then take it away from me. It felt like the universe just put it there and waited for me to find it. So I skedaddle. I give it to her later that day when I finally get back home, and she actually gasped. "That's it," she says. "I swear this is the one." How does something like this even happen? My sister loses a one-of-a-kind necklace from her youth 30, 40 years ago, and the very next day I find its twin. Or you know what, maybe it's the actual one. I don't know. I find it an hour away, buried in some stranger's garage. What are the odds? Is this an actual glitch in the Matrix? Do we call this a synchronicity? I don't know. But I've learned to trust my gut a little bit more now. You've heard of the X-Files, and even the Mr. E files. You probably know what the tape files are. But these, what you're here for, are the No Way files. Let's add one to the No Way file collection. It was May of 1972. 4 college women, driving home after a rodeo, rolled off Utah Highway 56 near Modena, heading towards Cedar City, Utah. They spot a fork in the road, they veered left, and disappeared into Gadianton Canyon. It's a route that locals said was haunted. What if this shortcut became a doorway to another world? The canyon walls closed around their Chevy Nova. At first, nothing was out of the ordinary. Rocky walls, a dusty road, but soon, things started to change. The blacktop abruptly turned into white cement and ended at a sheer cliff. There was no center line in the road, just road signs and silence and these dark canyon walls. But why did the scenery shift so suddenly? The girls shout in frustration, they spin the car around and they head back. But they didn't return to the highway. Instead, they find themselves in this lush farmland with wheat fields, pine trees, and a large lake shimmering under a full moon. No desert in sight. They were driving through a landscape that wasn't right. They pull off at a roadhouse with these glowing neon signs that were lit up with symbols they didn't recognize. They were these curved shapes that nobody could read. Men were outside, but they were no help. One of the girls nearly waved at them, but she was stopped when one of her friends says, "Hey, those guys weren't human." Those 4 girls now realized they had entered a place far outside of anything that they recognized. As they tried to leave, 4 egg-shaped vehicles with tricycle wheels appeared behind them. The vehicles were reportedly buzzing and glowing. They had 2 large wheels in the front and 1 in the back. These egg-shaped cars also had a single, very bright headlight. And this wasn't any sort of conventional design. They just looked like these eerie, rolling orbs, according to them. But the question now is, were these egg-shaped vehicles hunting the girls, or were they guiding them? The Chevy Nova raced at 80 miles an hour back into the canyon, and those strange vehicles followed them. And then, they disappeared. The cars did, not the girls. Not yet, at least. Their car careens out into a familiar sagebrush, and that's when disaster strikes. It spins out into a dry creek bed. The car ends up with 3 flat tires, no hubcaps, and the crash was 2 miles north of the highway across very rough terrain. However, there were no tire marks leading there. So how do these girls end up miles off-road with no trace of their wobbly ride? The girls were now stranded. They waited until sunrise, and then they walked south until they reached Highway 56. A state trooper picked them up. He listened to them tell the story of what happened, and he was stunned. This caused investigators to go out looking for tracks and debris and anything, but nobody found anything. Just a lonely canyon and 4 shaken women. Nothing explained how their Chevy Nova ended up off-road with no path to show. The area is called the Gadianton Canyon. It's named after ancient thieves from Mormon scripture said to haunt the desert. Locals claim that the canyon, quote, folds around people and transport them to other times or even other dimensions. Freighters long ago spoke of rocks that seemed to close themselves and vanish travelers completely. Was this some urban legend, do you think? Or something more real? Reddit users and ghost hunters continue to talk about the incident even today. They say something felt seriously wrong once you get past those rails. Kind of like someone closed the gate behind you that you didn't know was there. And the reports vary. There are mentions of the flat tires and the missing hubcaps and the no tracks. However, some witnesses even claim to see the entire thing, but there's never been any official statement given, and still, no physical evidence remains of what happened that night. A desert shortcut that shouldn't have led to anywhere. 4 women traveled to another landscape chased by these impossible machines, and then crash-landed with no explanation. They might have taken a wrong turn and simply got lost. I'm curious though. Could those odd, egg-shaped vehicles have been hallucinations? Or maybe just headlights reflecting off of insects or something? Maybe we'll never know. The girls were never the same that night. And the canyon? Well, it just sits there. Its forks, just waiting for you to take the wrong turn. Would you drive through Gadianton Canyon at night right now? What if you found the missing hubcap? Would it haunt you?